coming full circle here. Um, at the very beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how racism is not a personal thing, but a communal thing.
Hmm.
And now we're also talking about how uh, um, Christian living is a communal thing.
It's a communal thing.
And how so a lot of this is because I know people are going to say, well, I haven't done anything racist, and I know people in our community aren't racist. We've never exerted our prejudice with power, um, and honestly, Visalia is it's a strange multicultural and multi-ethnic mix. The last census from 2010 only had, in a town of 125,000 people, only had a few hundred African Americans.
Mm.
125,000 with I think it was like 300 or so African Americans.
Mm.
Not many.
Right.
And that's because Visalia and Porterville, actually, a little town just by us, was a major KKK stronghold back in the day.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
but there are a ton of Hispanics of second and third generation because of the agricultural nature of our
Yep.
community, as
Yep.
well as many Lahu and many Hmong community people as well, and growing Sikh community.
Mm.
So it's interesting. Our diversity is not in the kind of makeup that most people think in terms of diversity, because we're missing the largest minority group, which is African Americans. They're just not here.
Yep.
But there is a ton
Yep.
of it, though.
Yep.
We got a lot of other kinds, a lot of other kinds of diversity, I should say.
Yep.
And so it's interesting, but it's still a very segregated community.
Hmm.
I don't see um, the Hmong community because they're immigrant communities. I think that's,
Yes.
and when you're
Yes.
immigrant, you move and you stay with your people because it's safe. You know each other. You have cultural understanding. You share
Yes.
language, and
Yes.
so it's not a purposeful "I don't like you" kind of
No.
thing, but it
No.
is creating spheres of influence within yourself where you're safe and where you build power and community,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I don't know if there's a way to answer it. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm curious what it looked like then for our community of immigrants, Dutch immigrants, because a lot of people are here
Mhm.
themselves were immigrants or their
Yep.
parents were. This
Yep.
is this is a very recent immigrant community here, as opposed to West Michigan.
Yep.
It's very recent here. So I'm curious, and I don't really have an answer to this, but I'm wondering what it would look like for our community then, that has, for very good reasons, kind of clumped together. What it would look like now to share some of this of power that we have built over the last 30 years or so. I don't really know what that is, but it's a good question for us to ask.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question to ask. Usually, I find it interesting that churches don't talk about how they started. And to talk
Mm,
about how they started, it means to say that why did you pick Versailles? About all the other places, why Versailles? Or why Linden, Washington? Or why Manhattan, Montana? Or why Bellflower, California? Well, those knowing my CRC history, I know that most of those places were picked because of a network of families
yep.
who came together and who are doing nothing very, very different from what immigrants had done before. But our people use insularity as a way of bringing safety.
Hmm.
And life was around three things: church, home, and school.
Still is.
Hmm. And because of those three things, the most important thing, the glue that keeps that together, is the social network.
Uh-huh.
So everybody does. You know which church they go to. You know what school they go to. You know what neighborhoods they're in. You
Yep.
know what businesses they built. And so you frequent your businesses. You frequent your religious organization. You frequent those voluntary organizations, and that was recapitulated all over the United States and Canada, except for one thing, and what is also happening with Versailles is the world found you, the Hmong found you, the Sikh found you, and our way in which we have dealt with differences, or to preserve the saints, sounds familiar, is either to continue to, we either run, which is white flight, and we find another place to pitch up our Dutch Calvinist tent,
Hmm.
or we use fear by putting a moat around of us, and just hoping that people would never come. Both of those strategies don't work in a 21st century. Not melt, but people are migrating all over the United States who want the same thing as just as any other person wanted that at the beginning of the 20th century. The question is now, how do we view the other? Do we view the other as a threat, or do we view the other as a friend? And are we curious enough to want to build a kind of relationship in which it may not be about trying to convert, but maybe it's about how do you build friends across differences?
Hmm.
Because one of the things that we really one of our values is similarity. And how does similarity become an Achilles heel? That it prevents you from making the gospel bigger than your cultural hangups.
That is very good, Reggie. I think you explained our situation here without having been here. But I think it's something that is denomination wide, and it is a big reason why our denomination is shrinking,
Yes,
why we struggle. Um, Thankfully, I don't think it's too late. I hope it's not too late, but we have to be very open and aware of that this is a reality. And it's true that here in our church, we've had, and I've noticed this for 11 years here at Visalia CRC, we'll have many people come and attend for 3, 4 months, and
right,
then we just can't keep them.
right.
They love so much about what we offer at the outset, right? The
Yeah.
preaching, the worship, because no other churches in the area have our theology and our
Mhm.
practice and our discipleship methods for children. We rock at these things,
Yes.
but in the end, it's the social structures you mentioned.
Yeah.
We getting into that kind of community, becoming part of it.
Yeah.
Even though the community, and I'll be fair to my church here, they're not opposed to it. They
Right.
right? No
Right.
one's like, "Oh, we don't want you."
Right.
That's not what's happening here.
Right.
It's just that there's this ingrained social network that would take decades, I think, for people to become part of.
Right. How do you actually create social space in order that I get to feel like I belong?
Yeah,
And you're right. It's really about a feeling that I belong.
yeah, yeah,
And what I think for a lot of our white CRC brothers and sisters is that we've used our cultural as a barrier, and so you can always pick up suspicion. You know what suspicion feels like, because it feels like, okay, I have to prove myself to get in further accept or to get further acceptance
mm,
in this group. We've all felt that. We've all
yeah,
felt like when we know that when we're in a group, and we always know, and we know what it feels like to not be in the group.
yep.
And
Even though the
and
group isn't purposely trying to make you feel that way,
no,
right?
no, it is what it is how we have. Sometimes we don't realize our own biases
Mm,
unless somebody from the outside points it out.
yeah, which
And
never
then we
feels
get
good.
right, and then we get upset and say, "Well, I'm not really like that." Uh, We
Yeah,
we get defensive, right?
yeah,
And it happens in our churches is when how do we become open enough in terms of allowing people to point out those biases, not in order to say that there's something wrong with you, but in order that you may grow in your curiosity for different kinds of people who bring different kinds of experiences, but who have to feel like they can also be included within that. And human beings, we know we can detect when we don't belong very quickly.
Yep. Yep. We're attuned to these things, right? Just like body language, we're constantly interpreting people's body language without even realizing we are.
Mhm.
Yeah.